Welcome to The Explainer. I am so incredibly thrilled to have you here today because we are embarking on a journey into one of the most massive, awe-inspiring texts in human history. We're talking, of course, about the Mahabharata. Today, we're diving deep into its very foundation, the Adi Parva, to really grasp not just the story, but the sheer, staggering, epic scope of this masterpiece. It is a massive tale of creation, of divine beings, of absolutely devastating human tragedy, and honestly, of time itself.
So think about this for a second. What kind of story is so massive, so profoundly heavy, that it literally outweighs the foundational texts of an entire civilization? It's a pretty bold claim, right? Well, as we peel back the layers of this ancient history, you'll see exactly how the Mahabharata earns that distinction. We aren't just talking about a really long book here. We are talking about an entire universe captured in verse.
Section 1, The Ultimate Epic's Origin. Okay, let's just jump right in and look at how something of this unimaginable magnitude was actually brought into existence. To really wrap your head around the epic proportions we are dealing with, try this on for size. 600,000 verses. That is what the great sage Vyasa composed. 600,000. I mean, that would give anyone the ultimate case of writer's block. To put that into perspective, this dwarfs pretty much any other mythological or historical text you can even think of. The physical and mental scale required to just formulate this story is meant to totally humble us before we even read the first word. But, how did Vyasa physically manage to write all of that down?
Well, this perfectly illustrates the divine, almost frantic creation process of the text. Vyasa had this whole sprawling epic in his mind, but he desperately needed a writer. So the creator god Brahma advises him to call upon Ganesa. Ganesa agrees, but he throws down one incredibly strict condition. His pen cannot stop writing for even a single moment, no breaks. Vyasa, needing to buy himself time to actually compose the next lines, cleverly agrees, but he adds his own condition. Ganesa has to fully understand every single word before he writes it down. So Vyasa deliberately dictated these incredibly complex, tightly woven verses. They called them knots. Even the omniscient Ganesa had to pause for just a fraction of a second to decipher them, which gave Vyasa just enough time to compose the next verse. It's brilliant.
Section 2, A Universe in a Book. So from that grueling physical creation process, let's zoom out to the actual content. What exactly is packed inside these hundreds of thousands of verses? The sheer cosmological data this text encompasses is just staggering. The Mahabharata begins long before the main human characters are even a thought. It starts at the absolute beginning of existence, in total darkness with a mighty primal egg called Mahadevya, which is basically the inexhaustible seed of all created beings. From there, it tracks the generation of exactly 33,333 gods. It outlines the creation of the heavens, the earth, the seasons, and it maps out the endless perpetual wheel of the yugas. Those are the cyclical ages of the universe, where literally everything is created, destroyed, and then renovated all over again. Now, a story this massive couldn't just be handed over in an afternoon, right? It had to be incredibly carefully transmitted across generations, building this bridge from the gods all the way down to mankind. It starts in the divine realm with Brahma and Vyasa. Then, Vyasa teaches it to his son Suka and his disciples, like Vaisampayana. Vaisampayana famously recites it at the great snake sacrifice of Raja Janamejaya. And finally, we arrive at our narrator, Sauti, who recounts these sacred stories to a gathering of ascetics in the Naimisha forest. It's this vast, multi-generational waterfall of cosmic knowledge pouring right down into our earthly realm. Section 3, The Tree of History. So how on earth do you organize a story that spans from a primal egg all the way to sprawling human dynasties? The authors actually used a framework that was beautifully organic. The text itself is structured as the anatomy of a massive, inexhaustible tree. The early divisions of the book, like Paloma and Astika, serve as the roots anchoring the epic. Then the Sambhava section acts as the thick, sturdy trunk. As the story branches out into its major conflicts, the Book of Bhishma becomes the main branch, the Book of Drona the leaves, Karna the flowers, and finally, the deeply philosophical Santi book is the mighty fruit. It's a living, breathing structure.
But here's the really cool part. The tree metaphor doesn't just stop at the table of contents. It's actually mapped directly onto the moral foundation of the heroes themselves, the Pandavas. Yudhishthira, the just king, is described as this vast tree of religion and virtue. His warrior brother Arjuna is the trunk, the incredibly powerful Bhima makes up the branches, the twins are the fruit and flowers, and feeding this entire moral organism, the roots are Krishna and Brahma. This just visually aligns the characters' roles perfectly within the universe's grand design. Section 4, the tragic toll of war. Now, as beautifully structured as this universe is, we have to acknowledge that it is ultimately destined for a devastating human conflict. Let's look at the dark heart of this epic.
The emotional anchor for this absolute devastation actually comes from the blind king Dhritarashtra. He's the father of the Kauravas, the antagonists of the epic. After hearing the news of his side's complete and total annihilation, he delivers this haunting, rhythmic lament to his counselor Sanjaya. It is a deeply heartbreaking reflection of a father who basically watched the seeds of his own destruction being planted, one by one, over his entire lifetime. He recounts the exact moments he knew his malevolent sons were doomed. Just listen to the heavy, pulsing rhythm of his grief here. When I heard that Arjuna, having bent the bow, had pierced the curious mark and brought it down to the ground, then, O Sanjaya, I had no hope of success. You can really feel the inevitable doom starting right there, as he acknowledges the superior skill and the divine favor of his nephews.
But it wasn't just military might, it was a profound moral failing. The king continues, "When I heard that Draupadi had been dragged into court and treated as if she had none, then, O Sanjaya, I had no hope of success." This marks the deeply personal, horrific injustice committed by his sons that honestly made this cosmic, world-ending war entirely unavoidable. His lament crescendos through dozens of these tragic realizations, eventually ending with the fall of his absolute greatest champions. When I heard that the infinitely brave Karna, invincible in battle, was slain by Arjuna in that war of brothers, mysterious even to the gods, then, O Sanjaya, I had no hope of success. And the results of this inevitable clash? 18 entire armies of warriors slaughtered on the battlefield. Think about that. From a universe bustling with millions of creatures and magnificent kings, the war leaves only 10 warriors alive across both sides. Just 10. It is a total tragic destruction that perfectly mirrors that cyclical destruction of the universe itself that we talked about earlier.
Section 5, heavier than the Vedas. So, how does the epic reconcile this unimaginable grief and destruction? Let's zoom back out to look at the ultimate spiritual legacy of the text.
The crucial point here is how Sanjaya comforts the grieving, swooning King Dhritarashtra. He points not to human politics, but to that macrocosmic wheel. He says, "Time createth all things, and time destroyeth all creatures. Time passeth over all things without being retarded." He reminds the king that hundreds of mighty, virtuous, and divine kings have come and gone. Existence and non-existence have time for their root. It's a profound, chilling, and yet strangely comforting reminder of our place in the cosmos. Because the epic encompasses all of this, the creation of the gods, the complex trees of human morality, and the devastating, unstoppable wheel of time. It holds a totally unique place in history. As the source material tells us, in former days, the celestials assembled to physically weigh the texts. On one side of the celestial balance, they placed the 4 Vedas, the ultimate foundational spiritual mysteries. On the other side, they placed this history of the Bharatas. And you know what? The history weighed heavier. And that literal physical gravity is exactly where we get the name. Maha means great. It was denominated Mahabharata because of its superior substance and its immense gravity of import. It was heavier because it contains the absolute entire spectrum of existence. Religious duty, worldly profit, pleasure, final release, and of course the inescapable tragedy of human flaw. Which leaves us with this final thought. We've explored a text that maps everything from the primal egg to a blood-soaked battlefield, a story so incredibly dense it literally slowed down the gods to write it. As you go about your day-to-day, I want you to ask yourself, how do you measure the scale of the stories that shape your own life against the unstoppable wheel of time? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep learning, keep exploring, and I'll catch you next time.